this video, we'll continue with our video series on data storytelling for sports. Today, we'll focus on developing the actual data story. To do this, we'll cover off on the approach that we typically use when building out a data story. We'll then apply that process using a Miro board. We'll end the video with the structure of a data story that we can then use in the design and content production process. So, let's get started. Creating a compelling sports data story requires a structured approach that balances data, analysis, and storytelling. In our last lesson, we took our initial data exploration and narrative and analyzed the data in more detail. This resulted in quantitative findings and interesting background research. In this lesson, we're going to bring the story to life by taking what we've gathered and organizing it into a structure of a story. We'll do this by following 4 key steps that you can leverage to develop your data story. The first step is the narrative. If you've been following along with our course videos, you've done this already. But to reinforce what narrative is, it is at the heart of every sports data story, a construct that combines data, facts, and insights to engage your audience. Your goal is to present data in a way that makes sense to your reader, turning numbers into an engaging and accessible story. The second step is analysis and modeling. Once you have a strong narrative foundation, you need data analysis and modeling to back it up. This step helps you refine the story by applying deeper statistical techniques. For example, a descriptive analysis to identify trends using averages, medians, and standard deviations, a comparative analysis to compare players, teams, or seasons to uncover hidden patterns, or a predictive analysis that uses a regression analysis, machine learning models, or probability projections to forecast outcomes. The third step is background research in an attempt to find unique characteristics. Every compelling data story has an angle that makes it stand out. This step involves going beyond the numbers and researching the human or historical elements that enhance your analysis. This might mean exploring outliers, adding historical or player context, and doing cross-sport comparisons. The final step before developing your data story is the creation of the hook, plot, and arc. This is where you can bring a lot of the ingredients together to give the data story structure. By shaping your story with a strong hook, clear plot, and engaging arc, you ensure that your data-driven insights aren't just informative but also memorable and impactful. Implementing these steps can be time-consuming and disorganized. But this is the stage where you organize the messiness. You take the analyses and information you've generated and look for key elements of a story. At this point, you may find your story evolves, or you may even discover new stories. Thus, the overall goal here is to push through the messiness to develop a structured, compelling data story that lands well with your audience. The first step is to find a medium that works for you. For example, pen and paper, digital whiteboard, stickies, etc. Every storyteller has their own preferred way of brainstorming and structuring their thoughts. Regardless of whether it's pen and paper, digital note-taking apps, sticky notes, or whiteboards, the key is to find a system that helps you visually map out your ideas. The second step is to organize your findings using the structured approach we just walked through. Think of this as sorting puzzle pieces into a cohesive picture. Expect this process to be messy, especially if you have multiple opinions weighing in on the story. But embrace the messiness and iterate on the development of the story. The more you iterate, the better and more tight your data story will become. The third step is to explore connections across the data and information. Great data storytelling goes beyond simply presenting numbers. It looks at how different pieces of data interact. Connecting the dots between different insights makes the narrative richer and more insightful. And the final step, as we've discussed, is to tie things together with a hook, plot, and arc. Every great story, whether it's a novel, movie, or sports data report, follows a structure that keeps the audience engaged. Let's get more tactical and walk through the Miro board we created to develop our data story. To streamline the process of developing the data story, we use Miro, an online visual collaboration tool. Unlike traditional brainstorming methods, Miro offers a dynamic, flexible workspace where we can brainstorm, organize, and refine our story over time. Our team is virtual and spans multiple time zones, so a tool like Miro is great for us. When developing our story, we used the 4 steps covered earlier and created a fresh Miro board to help manage our activities. You can see a quick view of the Miro board here, which includes each step in the story assembly process. Note that some of the steps within our process have one or more Miro frames, which is the blue rectangle on which the information boxes, data, and charts are located. Let's walk through each frame on the Miro board. The first element in the board is more decorative and instructive. It's a reminder of the high-level structure and approach for getting to our data story. And we've already covered this in detail, so let's move on. The next frame represents the elements we've been working on in our past lessons and a summary of the quantitative and qualitative results of our analysis. Note that you may find more or less data and information that you want to use or that fits the story you want to tell. The goal here is to lay out a core set of information in a simple-to-understand manner. The next two frames are about the analyses. Having the high-level summary is one thing, but we like to include specific analyses that we've done. Having them in the board gives us a reference point for specific information. For example, you can see both the heat map and the multi-line chart that illustrate the performance peaks of the superstars. Now, depending on your project, you may have a ton of analyses that you've done, a fraction of which you might use. You'll have to think forward a bit here as you evaluate the results of your analyses and include that which will contribute something to the story. For us, some of this is more background or framing, but some of it will be directly featured in your story. We often think summary to detailed as we lay out the findings at this stage. The second analytical frame are peripheral findings. We included these just in case. We didn't necessarily use these in our final data story, but it's sometimes useful to go beyond the boundaries of your original analyses to see if there are other stories, comparative actors, subjects, or just secondary pivots, e.g., era, position, etc., that might be useful as background info. The next frame are the background findings and unique characteristics. Numbers are only one part of your story. It's important to do research and understand the subjects or actors in your story. Even if you're just building out social content without much text, you can include background information and facts as part of the content design. Try and be comprehensive here. This information tends to be the interesting stuff that gives your story life, with some twists and turns. At this step, a story should be starting to brew in your mind, so be sure to push on the background and facts and use this step to start organizing your story. The next frame is the hook, plot, and arc. Here, you should pick a structure that works for you. Also, we often refer to the 7 basic plots as a way to think about what is an interesting plot. The next frame is an extraction of the supporting data, that which is more relevant to the story structure that is emerging through the hook, plot, and arc. Again, we may not use all of this, but it continues to push us in the right direction. Here you can see that we're getting more specific around what we want to use from a data perspective. And the last frame is our data story structure. Our final data story structure emerges with 5 parts, where most of the parts of the story structure map to and leverage some data or visualization. What's amazing to think about is that it can take days or weeks, depending on the size of your project, to go from analysis to data story. And we've not even gotten to the content design stage yet. As a final thought, spend some time thinking about the relationship between the text and data you'll use in your story, along with the visualizations that you may have created. As a recap, this video walked through how to develop your data story. It was lesson 4 in our ongoing series on data storytelling for sports. In our next video, we're going to focus on how to start building your content. That is, how do you take the structure of the data story you just developed and translate it into content? We'll see you there.